Welcome to the Week 8 edition of the NFL Prop Zone. I am Dan Karpuc. I am here for BetQL, and rather than go through every single game, talking about every single player prop like I have in the past, I've come to the realization that all we need are the 10 top plays of the week that we're going to get action on, and I've identified those top 10 plays. We're going to go down from number 10 all the way down to number 1. As you can see the list there on the right-hand side, you know what the players are, but you don't know what the bets are until I get to them. So without further ado, let's get right into this. We're going to start off with Falcons wide receiver Drake London over 52.5 receiving yards versus the Titans this week. This is minus 132 over at Caesars. Now, opposing wide receivers have averaged 15.83 receptions on 21.67 targets for 187.17 yards per game against this Titans defense that just lost star safety Kevin Byard, and there's others that are presumably on the trading block as well, which makes this a really interesting game to look at here. But London has gotten over this 52.5 yard mark in 3 straight games with 78, 125, and 54. Now, I backed in the last couple of weeks. The 54 last week was very scary. I believe it was 53.5 I had him at. So he just got over that one. But this is one of his best matchups of the year against the pass funnel defense. And here's what some other top wideouts have done against the Titans so far this year. Chris Olave, 110 yards in week 1. Keenan Allen, 112 yards in week 2. Amari Cooper, 116 yards in week 3. Jamar Chase, 73 in week 4. Josh Downs, 97 in week 5. We all know that Arthur Smith's team has a really baffling tendency to not use their best players, but London is in too good of a spot not to ignore, and he has produced over the last 3 weeks. So I like that to continue. So number 10, Drake London. I think he's going to come through for us. Moving on to Kenny Pickett. Now, this, you might have to hold your nose a little bit to make this bet, but Kenny Pickett over 214.5 passing yards versus the Jaguars, minus 115, BetMGM. There's just too much value to ignore this. So in 6 starts this season, Pickett has gone over 214.5 passing yards 5 times. So in 5 out of 6, now he finds himself in one of the best spots against the pass funnel Jaguars defense that has allowed an average of 284 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. That's the second worst mark in the NFL. Deontay Johnson is back, and he joins the ascending George Pickens. George Pickens has been really good lately as well. This is a spot that I want to attack. Derek Carr and his hurt shoulder just threw for 301 yards against this Jacksonville defense last week. Before that, Gardner Minshew, the Colts backup, accumulated 329. And the week before that, Josh Allen had 359. So this pass defense in Jacksonville is definitely one that I want to target this week. So Kenny Pickett over 214.5 passing yards. And I have someone to pair with him. It is Mr. Jaylen Warren, his running back. Now, Warren finds himself in the best possible matchup for a receiving back this week. He's going up against a Jaguars defense that has allowed an NFL worst 7.29 receptions per game on 8.57 targets for 47.71 yards. So Warren is coming off a season low 1 catch on 2 targets. Let's get that out of the way. He was a reliable pass catcher in every other week before that, catching 5, 4, 3, 6, and 3 balls. Yes, he's splitting time with Najee Harris, but he's played 40% of the snaps every single week this season. He's going to be a factor, and he's going to be involved. And because I like Kenny Pickett, I also like Jaylen Warren in this matchup, just because we've seen that other teams have exploited this Jacksonville defense with their backs. So I like maybe even same game parlaying these two together. If you want to get some plus odds on it, go for it. But I like them separately as well. So Jaylen Warren over 2.5 receptions is absolutely something that I want to get on at -155 at Bet Rivers for the best price. Moving on to Calvin Ridley. Speaking of someone who did not perform last week, he has completely fallen off the map seemingly after a dominant start to the year, but another buy low, get right spot for the talented wideout here against the Steelers zone defense that rarely presses. Now, why does that matter? Well, per Jacob Gibbs of CBS Sportsline on X, Ridley has gotten targeted on 24.2% of routes run when not pressed and just 14.2 when pressed. Not only that, but he's averaged 2.06 yards per route run when not pressed and just 0.89 when pressed. So Ridley has faced some elite corners in recent weeks. He's also gotten some extra attention from opposing defenses, but that should change this week based on scheme. This Steelers team is not going to press. They're going to continue to run their zone. And I think Ridley is in store for a big week this week. Moving on, Browns running back Kareem Hunt. Anytime touchdown versus the Seahawks. I got this at plus 205 over at Bet Rivers. I think it was plus 205 or plus 210 last week as well, and we easily cashed that because he scored twice last week. Jerome Ford is doubtful this week. I don't think he's going to play. They already brought another reserve running back up, so that's a pretty good signal that Jerome Ford will not play. Deshaun Watson's out, so Hunt's going to have a huge workload in Seattle against the Seahawks this week. Although this Browns defense gave up 38 points in last week's win over the Colts, they're elite. I think they're still an elite defense. I think that was just a kind of weird game inside. All sorts of weird stuff happened in that game. And they're going to want to win with a rugged, physical matchup here, which is going to require them to control possession. Well, how do you control possession? That starts with establishing the run with Hunt, who scored 2 touchdowns last week and once the week before. So this coaching staff also really trusts Hunt around the goal line. Obviously, Hunt was with the team last year, but they gave him the ball on 4th and 1 for a touchdown and also lined him up as the Wildcat quarterback for another touchdown. So they've definitely schemed ways to get him the ball, especially in the red zone and inside the 5-yard line, which really translates well. I think plus 205 is a massive bargain here for Kareem Hunt to find the end zone. Speaking of running backs, let's move on to the next one. It's TJ Spears. Now, with the potential of both Will Levis and Malik Willis seeing time at quarterback, and Derrick Henry and other stars maybe even getting traded. I know that there was some talk about Henry getting traded, and then the coaching staff came out, or the front office came out and said that he's unlikely to get traded, blah, blah, blah. I don't know who to trust. It's better not to trust anybody. I love Spears getting over 29.5 rushing yards for a lot of reasons here. Spears has actually gotten over this number in 4 out of 6 games this season really quietly. He's recorded just 17 fewer snaps, 182 versus 199 for Henry, I should say, this season. So he has seen a ton of time. Spears actually outsnapped Henry in half of Tennessee's games so far. So Spears has that explosiveness to get over this mark with just 1 carry. I wouldn't be shocked if he saw double-digit rushes in this one, even if Henry is the de facto running back 1 here and gets 15 to 20 touches. I still think they're going to want to run the football as much as possible with Will Levis and Malik Willis under center here. So TJ Spears over 29.5 rushing yards. Let's move on to Adam Thelen. Coming in at number 4, over 63.5 receiving yards versus the Texans, minus 113 at FanDuel. Now, the Panthers may be 0-6. It's ugly. But what Thelen has been doing is far from ugly. The 33-year-old veteran slot receiver has gone over this mark in 4 straight games, logging 145, 76, 107, and 115 yards in that span. At this point, it's really hard not to like him to go over 63.5 yards, as he should continue to be Bryce Young's favorite target. Thelen has 30 more targets. Excuse me, 33 more catches and 312 more yards than any other Panthers wideout. With a 30% target share, he's an elite play every single week. And until odds makers bring up his yardage and reception totals, we just need to keep hammering him, everybody. He's just done nothing but hit recently. And this is another solid matchup for him this week at a really reasonable number. So 63.5, hit the over on that for sure. Speaking of someone you want to hit the over on, it's Alvin Kamara. Over 4.5 receptions versus the Colts. This should be more like 7.5 at this point. Minus 118 at Caesars. Now, last week, Kamara caught a ridiculous 12 of 14 targets for 91 yards. But the craziest part about it, that was his second 14-target game of the season, and he's only played 4 games. So he's recorded 13, 3, 7, and 12 receptions on 14, 3, 8, and 14 targets. I don't really care one bit about what matchup he's in right now. He's clearly the focal point of the Saints offense. They want the ball in his hands. Let's not overthink this. Derek Carr's shoulder might have a little bit of ailment going on, but it's clear that Carr really finds safety in passing the ball to Kamara out of the backfield here. The Colts have some guys who could bring pressure on Carr, and I just love this number. How can you not love this number at minus 118 over at Caesars? Again, let's not overthink this. Speaking of not overthinking it, Dante Foreman, over 6.5 receiving yards versus the Chargers, minus 115 at BetMGM. Over 6.5 receiving yards. Like, you read that correctly. That's a real thing. Roschon Johnson might be back this week, but I don't care at all. Foreman has just had 3 total touchdowns last week in a win over the Raiders. That included 1 as a receiver. He caught 3 of 5 targets for 31 yards and now gets the best possible receiving matchup for a running back against a Chargers defense that has allowed 58.33 yards per game to opposing running backs. That's the most in the entire NFL entering week 8. I would still bet over this number if it was 10 yards higher. I don't care if Johnson is back. Foreman definitely made it clear that this is his backfield, and I expect Chicago to continue to give him the opportunity to prove himself here against the Chargers. So over 6.5 receiving yards, yes, please. That is a clear misprice, in my opinion. And finally, we're going to go to Devin Singletary. Over 30.5 rushing yards versus the Panthers, minus 110 at BetMGM. Now, Singletary outsnapped Dameon Pierce 54 to 33% in Houston's last game, and it was notably late in the fourth quarter when Singletary got a lot of looks and was on the field instead of Pierce. What does that signal? Well, that signals that Singletary might be taking over the wide receiver, the running back 1 role here in Houston. He took 12 carries for 58 yards in that game and has averaged 3.9 yards per carry this season. That's not good, but compared to Pierce, who has 2.9 yards per rush, it is good. It's only a matter of time here until Singletary takes over and gets more snaps and gets more touches. And I think that we could see that start to take shape this week in a great matchup against the winless Panthers. Carolina has allowed 134.33 yards to opposing running backs, the second worst mark in the NFL. And I expect Houston to be playing from ahead in this one, which should lead to a lot of nice running opportunities for this offense. So Devin Singletary, over 30.5 rushing yards, is my favorite play of the week, but I love all 10 of these. Let's go 10-0 this week, everybody. Let me know what I missed. Let me know what you're tailing on, and let's crush week 8. Thanks for tuning in.